Hello and welcome, everyone. I've got Vince Teasy, founder and partner of the cyber law firm, here to talk to us today about AI and the law. Thank you, Vince, for being here.
No, it's my pleasure. Thanks a lot, Leon.
It's super exciting because AI is kind of transforming every industry. But through my conversations with you, I've learned so much about, you know, what is happening in the legal industry, both as it applies to in the courts and then actually practicing law. So I just want to start you off really broad. How is AI currently transforming the legal industry?
Well, AI has been involved in the legal industry now for quite a while because it started with e-discovery and helping attorneys with document review. A lot of the big companies have been using it. And then there's, obviously Lexis and Westlaw, the two big legal research companies in the US at least, have been like kind of introducing certain types of AI in the background. If you're talking about like generative AI and the recent explosion, now it's affecting the legal industry in so many different ways. Obviously, in the past year, if you look at the headlines, you see that all the major law firms have been creating like a practice group related to AI and establishing somebody who's going to be like the partner in charge of those types of solutions. So that's a very interesting development. But also, I think a lot of attorneys now are warming to the use of AI. Like I have a lot of connections that use it for brief writing. With that said, obviously there's risks to that, which we saw with the case in New York where the attorney was sanctioned for citing
Mm-hmm.
hallucinated cases in his briefs. Obviously, his brief was drafted with AI. But I think the fact that there are still, you know, respected attorneys that use it in their practice to help them with their brief writing is a testament to how those systems have come along. I've been using them from the start. I had a beta account for ChatGPT and ChatGPT Plus when it was still, I think, 3.5 or 2.5. And obviously now there's so many different options out there. There's Claude Pro, there's Llama, there's ChatGPT, like 40 or
Yeah.
4.0, whatever it is. Um, and then there's a bunch of like very specific legal startups that have come out. Um, and I've had the opportunity, fortunately, to test a lot of those products. And I don't think they're like going to replace lawyers in the
Mm-hmm.
immediate future, but I do believe strongly that attorneys need to use or need to learn how to use AI to their advantage because it's going to save time, um, as far as billable hours to
Yeah.
clients, and also it's just going to help them identify issues that they may not have caught, especially if it's not in
Well,
their
I think
practice
that's a
area.
great point because when I'm working with people across every subject matter, there's kind of two broad use cases for AI, in my opinion. The first is cost and time savings, right? And just like you talked about, attorneys are using that. But the second is improving the quality of decision making. And so, as we know, the legal system can be quite expensive. And
Totally.
we definitely always want to improve the justice in the country. And so improving quality decision making is critical. Tell me just a couple, two or three examples of how you're seeing or how you're using AI in terms of the operations and practice of law today that you think are, worth, telling other lawyers to use.
Yeah. So for example, I can remember when I first got my beta account for ChatGPT, and I was at my prior firm, which is a pretty large firm, would be considered big law. And I was working on a construction litigation case, and I just was like, I was preparing deposition questions, which, is like it's not necessarily too tedious of a process, and usually you have examples, and I did, but I already had a pretty good draft of deposition questions, and so I just was like, let me type in a prompt that kind of covers the fact pattern of this case. I didn't put any client information in there, but just kind of covered the fact pattern and then see how AI does. And I asked it to draft 100 deposition questions, and boom, within 20 seconds, I had 100
Yeah.
deposition questions, which they were, a lot of them
Hmm.
needed work, a lot of them were totally useless, but there were some in there that I didn't think of for that fact pattern
Yeah.
that were good. And I ended up, editing them and then adding them to the ones that I already had. And so immediately after that, I texted the partner in charge of my practice group, the litigation practice group I was in, and I was like, you need to check this out. Like, we need to have a discussion. The firm needs to start thinking about how to use AI. Um, and then the firm ultimately kind of went another direction with regards to AI. So they did get me involved with the CIO of the firm in demoing a lot of the other products
Hmm.
out there on the market. And this was in 2022, so the products have gotten
So much better.
exponentially
Yeah.
better already. But I used a lot of those products at the time, and uh, you know, I still do. I still use it for pretty much every type of drafting. I don't use it for case law research yet. I don't find it extremely helpful. I might use it as like an initial research tool just to kind of give me like identify some issues and then maybe give me some pointers on areas of the
Hmm.
law to look at, or maybe to use for search terms to put into a Lexis or a Westlaw. But I don't like trust the cases that it provides because I've tested it numerous times, and even today, like I haven't found a system, even using RAG, which is retrieval augmented generation. Um, there are certain companies that also use a lot of the big LLMs, but they use it through RAG, and so they have like their own proprietary system that then goes and uses those LLMs. And even then, it might cut down on like citation hallucinations. And what I mean by that is, like, when you cite to a case, there's a name of the case, and then there's the number and the date in the court, and that's called the caption of the case. Generally, the caption and like the case number. And when I initially used AI, frequently it would hallucinate case
Mm.
citations, just like totally make up case citations. And then, I learned, and I would tell it not to make up case citations, and it would still hallucinate. So basically what it would do is it would get real citations and then just change the facts in the underlying
Interesting.
case and then cite to it. Even create quotes that didn't exist in the case, right? So like, and I think a lot of those hallucinations haven't been cured, right? So like now RAG is really good at like filtering out like citations that are incorrect because they can basically take it and like confirm it with a database of
Hmm.
actual real cases. But what it's not good at catching is hallucinations of like what the case actually says. And then even beyond hallucinations, is the AI actually understanding and comprehending the holdings of the case? Sometimes they're very clear. Other times the holdings um, are very
Hmm.
convoluted. And then in the cases of like using it as a secondary source or dicta, like using a concurring opinion or a dissenting opinion or a non-precedential opinion, I find it to be extremely not useful. So I think, like, good litigators are not going anywhere anytime soon. But I think there's going to be a gap between like really great experienced litigators and more inexperienced litigators that is going to close quickly
Well, I
with the
love that
use of
answer
AI.
because it shows, some people think, oh, the people who have access to AI, they can know anything or learn anything at their fingertips. And clearly, I understood a lot of what you said, but then we're talking about, concurrent cases or, something presiding over another. And I'm like, okay, clearly, even with the assistance of AI, I'm not a lawyer and I can't accomplish that function. It's just, but you also had to learn
Oh,
what the
totally.
limitations are of the AI models and AI powered products today. And that's why I think it's so critical for people not in AI to get experience with the limitations because you're getting value and you're saving time and you're able to produce more high quality work. But that is not in conflict
100%.
with who you are as a lawyer or the quality of you as a lawyer. If you were a bad lawyer before, you might even be an even worse lawyer with AI. But if you're a good one, you're probably,
Yeah.
a phenomenal lawyer. And I see this gap shifting. And tell me more about this between, kind of the juniors or the junior lawyers and the experienced lawyers, do you think junior lawyers are becoming higher quality through the use of tools like AI and technology?
I mean, to be honest, yes, they are 100%. And I think AI can help junior lawyers in a way that they would have had to just learn by
Hmm.
trial and error. Like if for example, in my prior firm, I asked an associate to prepare a complaint, and like one of the elements of the cause of action wasn't pled in the complaint, and that's like a fatal error, right? Like you can't for a contract, you need offer, acceptance, and consideration. Those are like the basic three characteristics of each like contract case, right? And you can't plead offer and acceptance and then not plead consideration or
Hmm.
mutual assent. Like you can't do that. If you do that, it's going to lose
Sure.
and it's going to get dismissed. So it's one of those things where, like in the past, you'd have a senior associate or senior partner or a junior partner like reviewing an associate's work, and they'd prepare something, and then you'd look at it and you'd say, well, hey, you really got to be careful. You got to know what the elements of the underlying cause of action are, and you got to make sure that you plead all of those underlying elements. And if you don't, we're going to lose, and you're going to have a malpractice claim against you, right? So, in now, I think it's almost if I had an associate that provided me something like that now, I would be very um, concerned, because I'd say like where I might have given you a pass in the past based on your inexperience, to identify like basic elements to causes of action. Now at this stage with AI, it's like really that knowledge is at your fingertips, and you can have AI even edit your work and say, hey, am I
Yeah.
missing something critical here to the cause of action of a breach of contract or unjust enrichment? And AI can like tell you what those elements are, and it's pretty accurate, right? So I'm not saying that attorneys should rely on that. And in fact, we all have rules of professional conduct that require us to act with diligence in client representation, which includes, drafting legal documents. So I think that AI helps a lot, but there is a gap, and the gap is the inexperienced individuals that aren't using
Hmm.
AI are going to have a lot harder lessons to learn than the ones that are using AI and have that like senior
Well,
attorney
in the
background
hope,
as well.
the hope is, I think everyone thinks the promise of AI is it takes you from wherever you're at and it puts you in top 1%. And, for some rare use cases, it can do that. But probably just mathematically, a more impactful outcome is taking everyone who's below the curve, below 50%, and bringing them up to a 70th or 80th percentile. Because at the end of the day, there's a distribution of the quality of lawyer. But also at the end of the day, all the lawyers are taking cases and practicing. And so it's pretty impactful to the justice system at large to improve the entire quality, the baseline quality of legal services that we're getting, essentially at no increased cost to us. That's huge.
Yeah, no, I mean that is definitely, well, I wouldn't say no increased cost. Like I've demoed a couple of software, legal software that's like um it's AI that was created specifically for
Hmm.
legal use cases, and the fees are
Okay.
pretty steep, right? So like I just demoed one. I'm not going to say the name of it, but it was really good, probably the best one I've used so far. Still not going to replace attorneys anytime soon, but I think they charge something to the effects of like, I think one license was like fourteen hundred
Wow.
dollars a month, which
Yeah.
that's pretty steep, especially if you're like a small mom and pop lawyer, and it's like only you, that you're $1,400 a month just for AI that's going to help you do stuff like that. That doesn't seem like a good use case for it. But to your point about bringing like the quality of lawyers up generally, I think it really does two things, right? I think it does that for sure, right? It takes inexperienced lawyers and gives them a different research tool that's like interactive and that they can use, especially if they learn how to prompt well, and enables them to identify quicker issues that they wouldn't have spotted without it, right? And also even really quality attorneys that are very specific, because one of the things that the law has kind of lost in the past 10 years is like, I think a lot of legal generalists have kind of gone away, and now everyone
Mm.
is specialized. And that's a problem, right? Because if you come to me with a problem and you give me this complex fact pattern, like all humans do when we have conversations, right? As a lawyer, I have to be able to listen to my client, and I have to be able to figure out what potential causes of action they have, what potential remedies they have, what potential laws were violated, and that's a lot. And if you're like an IP litigator, for example, and all you do is copyright, patent, and trademark, and then like you have a person come to you and they're telling you that this person stole my patents, and then they communicated to a hacker, and the hacker hacked my account and stole stuff, and then they published all this stuff online defaming me, saying that I stole theirs, right? We've just covered like 30 causes of action. In that small fact pattern, I just covered 30 causes of action. And an IP litigator may not be able to identify all of those because they're so specialized. And so I think one of the benefits of AI is if you put that fact pattern into AI, it would probably be able to catch a lot of the issues that were there. And so if I'm an IP litigator, I want to use it so I know my causes of action, right? I know trademark, copyright infringement, substantial similarity, patent, but I don't know defamation, or a lot of times IP lawyers do know defamation, but I don't know civil
Okay.
RICO, right? And when you communicate with a third party, right, to commit a joint crime, essentially hacking of somebody's
Mm,
account, right? That's covered by civil RICO and a bunch of other Computer Protection Abuse Act, and there's a bunch of other laws out there, uh, or Computer Fraud and Abuse Act. So, I mean, the bottom line is, it's really advantageous for that purpose. The second purpose that it's really advantageous for, I think, is for very specialized attorneys, right? Like attorneys that are experts, because I think it's going to get to the point where it's going to be so good. You're going to be able to like review large amounts of cases, large amounts of data, quicker than you could otherwise do. And for like somebody who's an expert, who's got a busy schedule, who has a very busy caseload, it's going to free up a lot of time for them to build those systems for them to be able to get through a lot of the things that would be a huge time waster for them and allow them to focus on like really the
I love
critical
that.
issues,
And
right?
building off on it, we talked a little bit about equal access to justice. Explain to everyone what that concept is and how AI might help in the future, probably the far off future, but in the future, because I found this really fascinating when we spoke previously.
Yeah, I mean, this is something that I think a lot of bar associations throughout the country, the U.S., are at least working on, and I know some other countries. I have contacts in other countries that are also interested in the equal access to justice piece of this, where litigation is expensive. Most states in the US have a system that there's different courts that have different jurisdiction, and a lot of that jurisdiction is based on monetary value, right? Or the type of case. So, like, for example, they have small court
Mm-hmm.
cases, or in Texas, it's called JP Court, or Justice of the Peace Courts. In Pennsylvania, it's called Magisterial District Court. In New Jersey, it's called Small Claims Court. So there is these different types of courts, and they only handle disputes up to 15,000 or up to 10,000 or up to 20,000, depending on the jurisdiction. And so like cases like that are usually more affordable. And the reason why those courts were set up is really a lot of times for that equal access to justice, right? Because they know that like people need court to resolve certain
Sure.
disputes. Like landlord tenant court, for example, is usually one of the smaller courts. Ticket court, right? So the premise of equal access to justice is that it shouldn't just be like $15,000 and less, right? Like everyone should be able to get legal assistance and should be able to utilize the courts to resolve um like legal disputes, right? When they're wronged and they have a legal a cause of action. But unfortunately, the way the system is now, the way it works is, you know, the wealthy individuals, corporations, like the bigger corporations, like they have a ton of access, and smaller companies that don't have the money to pay big legal bills, and individuals that don't have the money to pay legal bills, even with divorce, like they don't have the same access, and the access is because of money. Where AI could really offer like a huge advantage is, reducing some of that access. And, one of the things is when you represent yourself in court as an individual, which you can to save money, you still have to pay court costs, which can range anywhere from $150 to $1,000 or more, right? You still have that time and effort, and then you still don't have the know-how on how to file complaints and answers, and there's all these technical things in the law that will get your case booted if you're a pro se plaintiff. So AI will enable them to do a better job representing themselves. So that's like another advantage that adds to the equal access to justice. And I think a lot of the bar associations are already on that. The question is, how trustworthy is it? How quickly will the courts adopt it? And I don't know the
Well,
answer to that question.
but I think that's a great point because I was hearing you earlier in the conversation talk about contracts and kind of the three elements required. And, someone like me, you're a business owner, you're signing contracts. And how often do you know what's in the contract? Actually, what are you actually committing to? Very little. Or what makes, the elements of a quality, legally binding contract, right? That's why we have to go to lawyers and pay so much money to get our contracts actually done at a high quality. But at least,
Totally,
at
100%.
least we can now bring our contracts to something like ChatGPT or Claude and start, asking the basic questions. What makes a valid contract? Okay, explain this to me with an analogy. Explain it not using legalese. Okay, does this actually apply to the contract I'm signing? What are the hidden gotchas in this contract? We can have a whole conversation and actually start understanding, and that
Totally.
will completely change how we actually do business as everyday people, right? It's going to be profound.
And contract law it's a good area of the law for AI. And what I've seen over the past 2 years is a lot of legal AI startups that are related to contract management, contract review, contract drafting, and they are improving the quality for sure. I mean, I think right now, currently, I don't trust AI fully when it comes to contracts because they're still not going to know certain
Mm-hmm.
things about contracts. And it depends on those systems. Like, when you have AI for contract review, is that AI going to be privy to all the litigation case law that comes out? Is it going to be aware to common law developments in contracts that
Yeah.
affect your contract? Like, you might have a clause, right? A clause of a contract that is let's just take like a limitation of a warranty, right? Like, that's a common clause you see in a lot of contracts. You'll see limitations of warranties, right? Limitation of exclusive warranties, limitations of implied warranties. A lot of those warranties can't be
Mm.
limited. Some of those warranties can't be limited without very specific language from that jurisdiction, right? So if you're in Florida and you're a business owner and you're like entering into a contract with somebody in Texas, and what they're going to be doing is in Texas, you have to be aware of whether or not a court is going to apply Texas law to that contract or your
Mm-hmm.
law, right? And choice of law is another one, right? Usually contracts have a choice of law provision. So there are a lot of areas that even AI and contracts can still get hung up on, which is why it's important to speak with an attorney that understands that. But I do a lot of contracts. I do a lot of IT contracts for IT startups, and I would say that, you know AI helps tremendously as a time saver for, controlling
Mm-hmm.
costs, um, for lawyers that are working in contract law, because the lawyers already know the rules, they know the law a lot of the times, and the AI just helps them like not miss anything. It helps them edit the contract. It helps
Mm-hmm.
them, you know, and then it basically drafts the entire contract for you now, depending on what the subject matter of the underlying like transaction is. And then you just go in and you just make sure that those clauses are in compliance with the area where you think, it's
Well, I
going to
think
be
that's a great
applied.
example because once again, if you're someone with no legal expertise, you can still benefit from understanding, hey, the concept that some warranties are limited and not, right? So maybe to make this example a little bit more concrete, and you kind of correct me as I go, but let's say I've started to work for a company and they've got a particular limitation that says, hey, I'm not allowed to moonlight outside of business hours. But maybe in the state or jurisdiction that I'm in, that is not allowed to be an application. Well, today you are essentially operating under the non-legal people are operating on the assumption that everything they get from these big companies is dead by the law, and if I do this, I'm out and they've got a case against me. But maybe that might not be the case.
Yeah, you're touching on an issue that's contract, but it's also a whole nother area of the law, which is considered like
Yes.
non-solicitation slash
Mm-hmm.
non-compete law, right? And usually trade secrets
Huge.
is in there as well. And I've done some litigation in that I've done some litigation in that arena, so I know that area pretty well. And you're absolutely right. Generally, the rule is if it's not tied to a geographic limitation, a reasonable geographic limitation, it's
Mm.
invalid. And most people don't know that, right? So that's generally the rule. I mean, it varies state to state, right? Obviously, there was a federal non-compete ban that said all non-competes are invalid, and then that's been put on hold by a federal court decision in Texas. But the bottom line is that you know, non-compete law is one area that you frequently see in contracts, and those factors of what makes a non-compete agreement or clause effective or not are actually really critical, and a lot of businesses don't understand
For
it,
sure.
right? And a lot of individuals that sign those things don't understand them. So that is a really good example. I've seen that firsthand
Mm-hmm.
several times. There's a whole nother question ethically whether or not non-competes
Sure.
are really ethical in the first place, right? Because you would think that they would be used with like lawyers or with high value traders or people like scientists that have certain like critical information. Like I work for Coca-Cola. I mix the soda for Coca-Cola, and I know the secret
Yeah.
recipe, and if I leave, I can take that secret recipe and go somewhere else. That's you think that that's what it was kind of designed for, but that's not
Mm.
who it affects primarily. It affects primarily like uninformed, usually like lower paid employees that really that's their livelihood, and it's kind of anti-competitive behavior, you know. So there's some anti um, monopolistic antitrust laws arguments in there as well. And I don't want to go too into detail with that, but it was a great example because it does show you that you can't just trust that the clauses in the contract are
Well,
going
in
to be
some sense,
enforceable.
we're all trying to grow the economy. We're all trying to increase the profit of our organization and our firm and what returns to ourselves. But in some sense, if more people understood what clauses were actually enforceable and not enforceable, there's latent value in the economy, certainly. Who knows? 1%, half percent, 3% of people who want to work have the desire to do more work that are under the impression their contract is enforceable and doing something, and they're not working and contributing in the economy when they have the desire, and most likely there's the demand for their services. And if that happens in many different aspects of the economy over the next 5 to 10 years, I think we can expect, a non-trivial amount of economic growth just from better, clearer understanding of what is enforceable and not. And this gets me to, I think, a really controversial topic that a lot of people are talking about today, which is deep fakes, which is, whenever you take an AI vision model and
Deep
they,
fix.
project a celebrity's face over your face or their body or change and manipulate it in some ways. Talk to me a little bit about the risks and what this introduces into, the legal realm, right? The proliferation of inexpensive open source deepfake technology.
Yeah, I mean, I guess deepfakes have been around now for, I mean, pretty good deepfakes have been around for 3
Probably.
years, probably. I think a lot of the first ones I saw were in like 2020, around that election. And I wrote an article not too long ago about the risks of deepfakes, where I cited to a ton of examples from 2020 all the way up to 2023, maybe even 2024. There was a couple examples, and they just keep getting better and better. right? Like now there is like right now I could look like Matthew McConaughey and be talking to you. There's like easily accessible software that's cheap and affordable and anyone can get it. And I could be talking to you right now and it would look really like I looked like Matthew McConaughey talking to you. And it wouldn't be
Sure.
easy to spot. Like if you're on a conference call with multiple people, you wouldn't necessarily be able to spot it. There are some tricks and tools that are available to be able to defeat those. But I mean, it is a huge industry right now for crime, right? Like it's like a multi-billion-dollar criminal industry. There was one case, I think, in Japan where a company was defrauded out of
Wow.
$23 million because they like deep faked the audio of the CEO's voice. And there's been other cases where like people have been defrauded out of thousands of dollars. Like I had a partner at my former firm who received the phone call from his son
Wow.
in jail, right? Or who he thought was his
Hmm.
son in jail. It sounded like his son. He believed it was his son. His son told him that he has an attorney and that he needs to give the attorney money. And then the attorney called him immediately after he hung up with
Wow.
his son. And it was his attorney asking for $30,000 to defend his son. And, while he was on the phone with this guy, he was texting his wife about the situation. And his wife ended up I think it was a Facebook Messenger call, and his son was in the car with his wife, right? So like he could have easily sent $30,000 or whatever the requested amount was to this attorney, and he said I was going to send it. There was no question. He's a affluent attorney, right? He can afford it, and like if his son's in trouble, he's going
Yeah.
to pay the bill, right? So. And that's just audio deepfake. That's not even video deepfake. So like it just goes to show you that like criminals are always at the forefront of technology, right? Like if law enforcement's not at the forefront of the technology as well, that's where the problems arise. And right now, you see that, and I see it in my work daily. We do cyber harassment, cyber stalking. There's a lot of cyber um, laws and statutes that have been passed in different jurisdictions that protect individuals, but a lot of the times, the prosecutors themselves and the law enforcement, detectives and agents and officers, they haven't been educated on those laws. Or if they have been educated, it's been like a very
Hmm.
facial education, and they haven't gotten in depth in order to understand like what questions do I have to ask when I'm interrogating a suspect. So, I just posted something on LinkedIn the other day about that, where like that's one of the services that we're offering is to be able to educate like law enforcement and prosecutorial offices on those issues and on some of the laws that cover it, and other attorneys as well, because it's a real concern. And deepfakes are a huge industry. They're only going to continue, and they keep getting better and better. Like I see people frequently reference the C2PA organization, which is like a protocol, basically digital watermarking, but it's like you sign up with them and you can Google it and look it up. And a lot of people are like, that's the answer. But within like 6 months of that forming, there was already like blogs on the dark web and even on the
Hmm.
light web, right? Like even on GitHub and things like of that nature, right? Like Reddit, where like you can go on there and you can figure out uh, what software you can use to be able to
Wow.
rip the watermarks out of the digital watermarks out of the videos, right? Or the photos. And then even worse, there's also like code, and there's been I haven't done it myself, but there's been people that have claimed that they've been able to use certain code to get the watermarks, to copy the watermarks and put them into new videos. So now you potentially have a situation where you have these third party protocols that are kind of being set up to help like verify that videos are
Hmm.
authentic, but their digital watermarks are being used against them and in order to bring legitimacy to deepfakes, which is like absolutely dangerous. It's dangerous for the rules of evidence, right? Like when you think of evidence like being admitted into court, people believe 20% of what they hear, they believe 30% of what they see, and they believe 90% or 80% of what they see and hear, right? So a video is very, very persuasive evidence compared to like eyewitness testimony,
Yeah.
right? And so, are the rules of evidence sufficiently crafted to be able to sufficiently authenticate videos that could be admitted with deepfakes? People are like, well, people aren't going to do that because then they'd be in contempt. Well, guess what? If somebody is unscrupulous criminal individual with malice, you don't think that they're already on trial? They're not going to want to fabricate evidence to try to get them off of the case? Absolutely, they are. So I think that's an area that the legal field is going to have to tackle 100%. And luckily, in my firm, we have several clients already that also, like, they're companies that specialize in deepfake detection and have different tools and are working on really unique solutions to being able to completely um, create a system where you can authenticate the
Yeah.
videos 100%. Now, it's hard to say 100% with anything these days, but a lot of the deepfake detection tools that I've seen, um, when I've looked at the research papers that have talked about like their accuracy, it's not
Yeah.
good, right? If you look at the deepfake detection tool, I think that Facebook put out, like, maybe it was 2022 or 2023, there was a study done on it, and they claimed that it was like 70% effective, but then in actuality, like, the research paper showed that it was like less than 40% effective in determining deepfake video. So it's one of those things where it's like, is it good at detecting deepfakes that were created with software that was published back in
Sure.
2020? Yeah. But what about the software that just came out today, right? That is like, cutting edge. And so I think that that's going to be an
Yeah,
ongoing
and I
problem.
think that's the part, just like you described, with people scamming other people. You today could send someone a Facebook message of a family member or loved one in a car crash or whatever. And I think the scary part is, in the past, maybe it was kind of like a 360p blurry, kind of camera. Today they can get it 1080p 4K deepfakes. And how are you supposed to know? How are you, most people don't even know what a deepfake is. Even though it's become popular on the internet, and it is more widely known and understood that images can be manipulated, but people are able to create. At first they thought it was just photos, and now so quickly it's full videos. So if you saw someone coming in to break into your daughter's house or whatever, and you saw the video of it, that could be easily generated. And I think that, that is a major issue that we really need to figure out, and has huge implications on the legal front, right?
Totally. It's massive. There's several areas of the law that it's impacting. And you know, our firm has a unique opportunity to kind of being see all those types of cases, and we've only been operating for a short period of time, but we've already seen multiple cases where this has come into play. So I think it's definitely a concern. It's a useful tool. Like, there's a lot of like positive uses for it as well, but it's one of those situations where now that like um the seal has been broken, you can't reseal it,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like, that technology's out there, and you can pass regulations and statutes and everything that you want to try to like make it illegal or whatever. But the people that are committing the crimes that are
Sure.
responsible for that, multi-billion-dollar fraud industry, like, they're not going to care about that. They're going to continue to use and improve that software. And so how do you combat that? And a lot of times people are like, well, I'm not on social media, so like that doesn't matter. But like, if you Google anyone's name and you click
Mm-hmm.
on Google Images, you'll find a
Yep.
picture of that person, right? All you need for a good deepfake now is like a 3-second clip of their voice, and a photo, and then it can do the work. And you know, there's so much video out there now. It's just something that you can't be afraid of. You just have to live your life and hope that the powers that be kind of figure something out, or work on a solution for yourself, because just like minimizing your exposure online is probably not going to
Sure.
protect you
No, I
anymore.
think that's a great point, because to kind of full circle the whole conversation, the same technology that gives us all this fantastic benefits, certainly we are not going to hide under the rug people using it for illicit and illegal and harmful purposes. And that's, everything from something as simple as the mail, right? Or email scams, right? We all use email every day. We live with it. We've got a spam filter. People have filters, but we're so early in this adoption of AI technology, in this new kind of transformational wave. And so I just want to kind of wrap with, as you look to the future, tell me, how can legal professionals best prepare themselves today for what's coming in the world of AI, as it applies to law?
So, you know, this question has been asked to me before by just individuals that knew that I was into this, you know, cyber tech related areas. And what I tell them is start
Mm-hmm.
small, right? Just start small. Just like, go, you don't even have to download it. You don't even have to subscribe to an account. Just go to the freely available version of ChatGPT, the freely available version of Claude Pro. Well, Claude Pro is paid, but just regular Claude or Llama, I know is free. There's apps that you can download like
Mm-hmm.
Perplexity that are free that are pretty good, and just play around with it. Don't put any like major high risk information into it because you don't know what you're signing up for. But I mean, like that's how I started. I started with just smaller little questions, and I was amazed with what it could do. It can write books for you. It can write chapters of books for you. It can give it, like if you are a parent and you have a child that you want to tell stories to at night, but you have a limited number of books in your house, just ask ChatGPT to like write you a
Mm-hmm.
children's book on X topic, and it'll just generate it, right? It won't be like a super long book, but we're talking about reading a story to your kids for good night. I've actually done that. I have like several children's stories that I just have generated with ChatGPT so I can tell them to my kids. So it's really it's fun. It's extremely useful when you determine like how it can benefit you, and ultimately that will prepare you for
Mm-hmm.
the future, right? Because you're going to be exposed to certain things. You're going to be understanding certain principles that other people that haven't used those products won't know, right? Or won't have. So I think that's the first thing is start small, and then two, read read about it. Like don't just go and use stuff and then not read about it. Read about what's going on in the legal field. There's tons of articles out there. People are publishing articles every day. You can go to our website, cyberlf.com, and you can read articles that we publish on different areas of cyber and tech law. Um, we post stuff on LinkedIn. I do a lot on LinkedIn. It's like where I do a lot of my networking, and it's also where I'm connected to a lot of people that are like pioneers in the prompt engineering fields, and I like to read their blogs and find out how they're
Mm-hmm.
using AI because then I can try to use AI in a similar fashion. So start small, read, right? And then three, keep an open mind. Like everyone wants to say, oh, it hallucinates. I'm not going to use it anymore. There was like a lot of law firms in 2023 were like, oh, you will not be able to use
Mm-hmm.
AI for your legal practice, right? So if you worked in a law firm and they said that, you were kind of stuck, right? Now you can't use it. Similarly, a lot of judges have said you must disclose when you use AI and describe
Sure.
what you use it for, right? I think that's a little bit more permissive, but at the same time, it might be intimidating to an attorney that's thinking about using it. So, but I would just say keep an open mind because these products are
Mm-hmm.
getting better. They've gotten exponentially better. And so just because AI doesn't do something you think it can't do now doesn't mean it's not going to be able to do it in the future. And not only that, it's probably not doing the thing you want it to do because of you. I mean, let's face it, right? Like the prompt engineering is like a whole new field now because these systems they use algorithms and they write queries based on what you prompt, and depending on how you phrase the prompt or what you put into the prompt, and depending on what it's
Mm-hmm.
trained on and what you provide it to review, it's going to give you a different response. A lot of the generative AI that's out there now. So I think that's also something
I
to
love
keep in mind.
that. I think that's such a great point and place to wrap because if you don't start experimenting and using it today for small stuff, then in 3 years, like we said, we're on the curve and we're at the beginning of the curve. And if you're listening to it, you're ahead of the curve. That means you have to suffer a couple mistakes and you're going to try to do things and it's not going to necessarily work exactly as you want it. But if you invest, the underlying tech and platforms are going to rise up beneath you and you're going to just like surfing a wave. We're all at the level playing field right now. Some people pushed a little bit up by the tide, but if you catch that wave just perfectly, you're going to really stand out in your work at the end of the day. So I really appreciate you taking the time, Vince, to kind of share your experience and learning. This has definitely been
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah,
It's my
this
pleasure.
was definitely an anticipated episode, and I'm glad that we got to talk about the strengths, but also the things that the legal field that has such an impact on our entire economy and society. The challenges that it's going to face. So, everyone, please go give Vince a follow on LinkedIn and cyber law firm cyberlf.com. And thank you so much, Vince. I appreciate it.
Thanks a lot, Leon. I really appreciate you and all the stuff that you're doing over there at Amplify
Awesome.
AI.
Thanks so
Take
much.
care.